NFL Week 13 is officially upon us. That means it is time to take a look at the official Circa Million contest lines for Week 13. As always, we got to get to 5 games that we're picking against the spread for our official entry. If we want to use the Cowboys or the Seahawks tonight, we got to get those entries in within the next few hours. We'll see about that. Joining me to help me make these picks this week is our good pal, Brandon Kravitz. Brandon, you joined me yesterday on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Pod. Got you coming on the XM show tonight as well. Always good to chat with you, and it's good to mix in some football talk with all the hoops.
Absolutely, yeah. The basketball slate has been heavy, but between everything that we saw over the weekend, Thanksgiving games, and we got a Black Friday game in there, I'm jonesing for more football. I know it's only been a couple of days. It feels like it's been a month since I've watched football, so I'm ready to get into it. And like you and I were talking about before we hopped on, and went live on the stream, I really like some of these numbers. It's not usually, with the contest, you got to fit some in, whether you like it or not. This week, I think we're going to have some decisions to make. I think we're going to leave some that we like on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, it's unique because most weeks I don't feel that way. Usually we could get to 2 or 3 that we really like, and then, maybe a fourth, and then that fifth one, you're just kind of crossing your fingers. But I like some of these lines. It actually scares me how much I like some of them, which is, it's like maybe I just want to fade myself intuitively on some of these. But we
can see. We'll probably end up arguing with each other over a few of these anyway.
I look forward to it, man. I got 4 or 5 that I want to pitch you on, and we'll try to talk about as many games as we can in the next 15 or 20 minutes. Last week we went 3-2. Got burned on a couple of bad picks. For whatever reason, John and I were both feeling the Arizona Cardinals, and they came out. They scored on their first drive. They went for 2. We're like, all right, we love the aggressiveness. We got ourselves a shootout. There was nothing going on for Arizona after that, and I think I actually may be picking against the Arizona Cardinals this week. But first of all, Brandon, we have Thursday Night Football tonight. That game about 6 hours from now as we record around 2 p.m. Eastern. Again, if you want to use the Thursday night game, you got to get your picks in about 2 or 3 hours before game time. In general, this year, I don't think we've played a single Thursday night game. We did use the San Francisco 49ers as part of the Thanksgiving slate last week, but obviously that was a unique week. I don't love doing that because you have to lock in all 5 picks on Thursday evening, and that means you're waiting on some injury news. Lines could shift. You never know. I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks ago we took the Chiefs in one of those games, and then Patrick Mahomes ended up being sick. That news came out on Saturday, so typically I like to wait until Saturday morning. The deadline is usually around noon to officially get those picks locked in. But what is your general stance on that as far as not necessarily having all the information you might want? You got to feel pretty strongly about that Thursday night pick in order to make it worth it.
For sure. And I think that this could be one of those that's actually worth it. Most weeks, I would tend to agree with you. Wait till you get more information. But it works the other way, too. Sometimes either more information can cloud your judgment, or the information that you get doesn't help you make the right decision. So I go back and forth on this all the time as a sports bettor. Do I want to go with my initial read and a little bit of research and get my picks in before we get to the weekend? Or am I trying to gobble up as much information as possible and then bet at the very last minute? I've certainly kind of ping-pong back and forth with that. And I find that my personal strategy is to get them in a couple of days ahead of time. So I guess I'd be more inclined to set my picks on Thursday.
Yeah,
and I do like the Dallas Cowboys tonight, by the way.
I'm on the same side of that one. It'd be pretty tough, I think, to mount a case for the Seattle Seahawks right now. They won't have Kenneth Walker. And we should note these lines that come out around noon on Thursday, they do not change in the Circa contest. So, if I don't know, are the Chiefs playing? Yeah, they're playing this week. If Patrick Mahomes is ruled out, we're still getting the Chiefs at -5.5. You're still getting the Packers at +5.5. So that's something to keep in mind. It could go either way, right? You could get burned, or sometimes that line can move in your favor. But let's do a quick discussion of Seahawks Cowboys. Do we feel strongly enough to use the Cowboys? I would say yes. We keep kind of waiting for one of those like what the heck was that type of games from Dallas. They are not double-digit favorites for the third or for the 4th week in a row. This number locked at 9 in the Circa contest, but they're close, and they have done nothing, Brandon, but take care of business against below-average teams at home. And look, Seattle, they're not the Giants. They're not the Commanders, which we saw the Cowboys decimate last week. But they're in a bad spot right now. They're in a terrible stretch of their schedule. They're banged up. I think there's a lot of reason to back the Cowboys tonight.
Yeah, and we've seen the Cowboys do this to teams that aren't quarterbacked by Tommy DeVito. They did this to the Rams with Matt Stafford at quarterback. So this is what just the Cowboys impose their will at home when they're healthy, and this is just a great spot for them. You could see them winning, and if they win, they're going to win by a lot because that's what they do. I don't see how this Seahawks offensive line protects Geno Smith, and his biggest issue is facing pressure, like most quarterbacks, but he really struggles with it. When he doesn't have a clean pocket, he's a mess, and he can't rely on one of his best weapons in Kenneth Walker. I don't see, unless DK Metcalf just goes off and has one of those games, I don't see how Seattle stays in this one. My favorite bet for this, which is just not on the board, but I've already taken it, is Cowboys -5.5 in the first half. Yeah. I think they take care of business early. Seattle does have enough offensive firepower to give you the backdoor cover, but I really think that's the only way they get there is last 2-minute sort of touchdown. I could see that giving us the L if we go Dallas. I'm okay with the idea of Dallas being one of our 5, but we might have 5 others that we like more.
Right. Dallas has outscored its opponents 205-60 at home this season, but those opponents are the Jets, the Pats, the Rams, the Giants, and the Commanders. So that's playing into it to some degree. Seattle, meanwhile, 220 yards of total offense last week against San Francisco. They ran 18 total plays in the first half. They were lucky to get to positive yardage in the first half, and if you don't get that kind of fluky Jordan Brooks pick 6 early in the second half, that game is probably even more of a blowout. So yeah, we'll put that one aside for now. I'll have to talk to my co-manager, John McKechnie, get his thoughts on this one, but I have a feeling he'll be leaning in the same direction. One game that I feel pretty strongly about, Brandon, and I can't believe I'm saying this because of the team involved here, but I really like the Pittsburgh Steelers at home, -5.5 against the Arizona Cardinals. Maybe I'm buying too hard into this, post-Matt Canada bounce, but we saw the Steelers offense awaken, at least yardage-wise, over 400 yards for the first time in 58 regular season games. They outgained Cincinnati by almost 200 yards last week. Still bad in the red zone. You only got to 16 points. That's a concern. And a lot of that, I think, is, the slippage that we've seen from the Cincinnati defense. Obviously it's one thing to go up against Jake Browning, but I think the Bengals defense to me is the far bigger concern. We'll talk about that later when it comes to Bengals Jags on Monday Night Football. But I think the Steelers now get maybe the best matchup in the NFL if you're looking for a defense to target. Arizona, dead last in pressure rate, dead last in opponent first downs allowed, 31st in EPA per play on defense, 32nd in opponent success rate. So I don't think Pittsburgh, you don't have to believe that this offense is just going to be night and day from what it was 2 weeks ago when Matt Canada was still the OC. I think the Arizona defense is so bad that this could be a game that Pittsburgh could win while still playing relatively conservatively. And, Steelers are a good defense, right? I mean, Arizona's frisky for the most part. It feels like they start fast every week, but they also seem to kind of lose steam as the game goes along. And I think this is one that as long as Pittsburgh doesn't commit 3 horrific turnovers, I think they can win it by a touchdown.
See, but that's the thing. They've been avoiding those horrific turnovers. They might be the luckiest team in the NFL. Feels like the ball always bounces in their direction. And when that's what you're relying on, eventually you are going to get caught red-handed. It didn't take us long to get here, but I completely disagree with you.
Really?
I'm on the complete other side. Not only do I disagree, I love the Arizona Cardinals here. I know you got I don't care where they are because I don't think they have a home field advantage. This is a bet against the Pittsburgh Steelers here. Kenny Pickett is so bad. He does not deserve to be a 5.5-point favorite against almost anybody in the NFL. And here I get Kyler Murray on the other side, who can do the one thing to negate the Steelers' biggest strength, which is run away out of the pocket away from TJ Watt. So I think look, I know what you said about Arizona's defense is true. Kenny Pickett doesn't have to have anybody in his face to overthrow Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. And I'm not buying this team at -5.5. No way.
See, I don't think this game comes down to Kenny Pickett. I don't think Kenny Pickett has to win it. I think Jalen Warren and Najee Harris can win it.
That is very possible, but I also ask myself this question: how many touchdowns do the Cardinals have to score in order to cover this spread? And I think the answer is 2. And I think they can score 2 touchdowns. You score 2 touchdowns against the Steelers, you're most likely covering a 5.5 point spread. Look at last week. They're getting Jake Browning in his first start with the Cincinnati Bengals. They beat him by 6. They scored 10 points. The Cardinals scored twice. They will cover this spread.
Okay. We agree to disagree on that one. I think John's going to have to be the tiebreaker. I'll be doing the full NFL Week 13 betting breakdown with him. You can catch that on the RotoWire YouTube channel later this afternoon. I mean, good points all around. I feel like I made good points. I feel like you made good points as well here, but I just don't trust Arizona right now, man. I think
it's your contest. Don't let me talk you out of it. But
hey, that's why I brought you on, man. I want your opinion. I value your opinion here. Pittsburgh put up 421 yards of offense. They converted 8 third downs last week. That should not equate to 16 points. And I know the argument is, well, that's what the Steelers do. They don't finish off red zone possessions. They were 1 of 4 in the red zone last week, but they averaged almost 5 yards per rush against Cincinnati. I think the Cardinals are an even worse defense. Like that to me, winning that game by 6 was somewhat of a phony final. I think, if you look into some of the EPA numbers, like Pittsburgh absolutely should have scored in the 20s. I think if they get to 23 in this game, I think they can win and cover it. 23-17 gets us there.
And how much of this is just the initial response of the players were tired of Matt Canada's offense.
Sure.
And then they immediately, we see this all the time in the NFL. The Panthers might offer this weekend with no Frank Reich on the sideline, though I don't really think that was the problem. But clearly, Najee Harris brought it up. He didn't want to play. He was tired of playing in this offense.
Right.
And so you got a much more locked-in version of the Pittsburgh Steelers outside of Deontay Johnson. And, it's a total narrative play, but I don't like the way that looked either. How cohesive is this locker room, really? Yeah. It just comes down to one of my betting standards, if you were to put it on like my 10 commandments of sports betting, is don't bet irresponsible favorites. And Kenny Pickett is irresponsible with my money. So Steelers
are 3-1 ATS as a favorite this season. Okay. So I agree with everything you said. I'm never going to feel comfortable backing Kenny Pickett. This is a bet against Arizona more than it is in favor of Pittsburgh. But anyway,
it sounds like we're in agreement there. We're both betting against the opponent rather than on the team.
Yes, fair enough. Okay, let's get to a game that you want to pitch me on. What is one of your favorites other than Arizona plus 5.5?
Okay, it's tough to make this call, but sometimes the number just speaks to you. The San Francisco 49ers -3 tells you a whole entire story. Why in the world would the odds makers be so kind as to hand you a +3 with the Philadelphia Eagles at home? It makes no sense until you start to dig into some of the numbers, the injuries, and the spot that this team is in. The San Francisco 49ers are completely healthy. They've had extra days to rest and get ready for this game. This is a circle on the calendar game for San Francisco after they played Philadelphia in the NFC title game last year without their quarterback for the majority of this game. This game means everything to San Francisco. Meanwhile, you've got Philadelphia, who is phenomenal against the run. They can't stop anybody via the pass. And here you have Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk that should be able to shred Bradbury and Darius Slay, who have not been playing well. The guys on the interior, they're banged up. Jordan Davis got hurt at the end of last week. One of their top linebackers got hurt at the end of last week as well. So between injuries, the fact that this team has played a gauntlet, Kansas City, overtime against Buffalo, and now you've got San Francisco coming to town completely healthy. Those are the reasons, but man, this number just screams. They're baiting you with the +3. I'm not going to take the bait. I'm not going to grab the Twinkie at the end of the stick. I'll take the 49ers -3.
So I like the 49ers to win this game. I don't like the -3. If this is 2.5, absolutely. No question. I'm worried this is a 3-point game, right? And you're losing on the push, which is not the end of the world. But nonetheless, I agree with everything you said. And again, I think San Francisco wins. I don't like the number. I really wish it closed at 2.5. That's where it's at FanDuel right now. And on top of Jordan Davis.
Yeah, it opened at minus, I think it was like a -1 when I first looked at it last week, and the number just moved quickly. It tells you everything.
You think this is somewhat of a blowout situation? I'm not saying, San Francisco wins by 20, but you think they could comfortably win by a touchdown?
I think they can. I mean, if it were past 3, if it was anything beyond that, that would be my limit for betting San Francisco because of the strong likelihood that this game lands on 3. But I'm thinking San Francisco definitely wins this game. And if I end up with a push, I end up with a push. You just kind of cross your fingers and hope that it doesn't land on the number. But I'm confident they'll win. And then I agree with you. The biggest concern is the number itself, but I'm betting the team, I'm betting the spot. And when San Francisco wins, it's kind of like Dallas. They tend to win big.
Okay. I can get on board with that. I don't love the number, but if I'm on the side of San Francisco, I got to have some confidence that they can win that game fairly convincingly. But again, really, really wish we were getting that one at 2.5.
Sure.
That is a tough number. I mentioned Cincinnati earlier. They are on the road at Jacksonville. First Monday Night Football game for the Jaguars since 2011. That was a Blaine Gabbert, Cecil Shorts, Maurice Jones-Drew game for the Jaguars. That's how long it's been since they played on Monday night, either home or on the road. Cincinnati, astonishing stat that we dug up a couple weeks ago when they were playing in that game against Baltimore. They are 1-25 straight up in road or neutral night games in the last 15 years. They have lost 16 straight in this spot. And obviously we need them to lose big here. Jacksonville, 8.5-point favorites at home. To me, I like the Jags. And it takes a lot, as you know, for me to want to back the Jaguars. I am like the most pessimistic Jaguars fan on the planet. And it's not even about Jacksonville being 7-1 ATS in their last 8 games, coming off of a huge win against Houston. It's about the Cincinnati defense. And, I think Jake Browning could be a little frisky, especially if they get T. Higgins back. I think Cincinnati might be able to score some points. But the Bengals have been one of the worst defenses in the NFL over the last several weeks, over the last month, really. They've allowed an average of 430 yards per game over their last 5, including 421 to the Pittsburgh Steelers last week, who I think we both agree are not a good or reliable offense. So even if Jake Browning, conjures up some magic, even if they get some fluky plays, they had a couple tip balls that went for big plays to Jamar Chase last week. I think this is a game that, Jacksonville could win something like 31-20.
Yeah, I'm not in love with this one. I think I would tend to just not play it because I don't trust Jacksonville quite enough with this big of a number against a Bengals team that still has enough talent to cover a spread like this, but I'm definitely not betting Cincinnati. So I would agree that if you're going to play this game, it's got to be on the Jacksonville side. That crowd, they don't have a huge home field advantage, but in prime time, in this situation, that crowd is going to be buzzing. And the fact that you don't have to worry in any of these. I live in Florida. I know how the fan bases work around here. If you get a big time opposing fan base, they'll take over the stadium, at least 50% of it. That's not going to be the case with the Cincinnati Bengals. So this is going to be a strong pro-Jags crowd. This city is going to be really excited to back them in this situation. So I actually think a rare occasion, almost like a playoff spot where you're going to have a lot of the hometown fans that are actually skewing the result a little bit. I like Jacksonville. Don't love them. Okay.
Fair enough. I worry about the turnovers with the Jags, right? I mean, it feels like they lose like 2 horrific fumbles or Lawrence has a fluky pick every single week. And if they commit 2 or 3 turnovers, I think that could be enough to keep Cincinnati in it. And I think the Bengals kind of open things up offensively, and we'll see what that looks like. Like maybe that's not even a possibility with Jake Browning, but I thought they played pretty conservatively last week and understandable in Browning's first start. But you got nothing to lose at this point, right? Like they could not run the ball last week against Pittsburgh. Jacksonville's been great against the run. I think that's going to be the case. And if they have T. Higgins back and Jake Browning is throwing the ball 40 times, even if that results in 2 or 3 picks, like that does create some variance for me. And the Jacksonville secondary has been a little bit shaky of late. So I understand your thinking there. All right, what's another game that you like?
Yeah, I was just looking at some of the results on the Jags schedule. They have been separating from some of the lesser competition that they've faced. I picture the Jags, without looking at the numbers, as a team that I always feel like plays to the level of their competition, both good and bad. But if you look at the final results, that hasn't necessarily been the case. So Jacksonville, not a bad play there. I mean, I feel crazy saying this because talk about a team that can't be trusted as a favorite. I'm actually going against my own advice here when I tell you Bucks -5.
Oh yeah, I got that on my list.
Okay. Usually you get the dead cat bounce from the team that just fired their head coach. I don't think this is this sort of situation where the way we usually see it play out. The Josh McDaniels, the Matt Canada as a coordinator, where the team is so fed up with listening to this guy, they don't believe in him. They don't have buy-in, none of that. I don't think that was the issue. I think the owner didn't like Frank Reich. I don't think it was a player versus Frank Reich problem. Now, we'll find out. Maybe I'm totally wrong about this. That Panthers team is horrendous. And the Tampa Bay Bucks coming off of a loss, so Todd Bowles should be able to kind of rally the crew here. They have enough talent to cover this number. Divisional opponent against a team that just fired their coach. Usually you want to be on the underdog side there. I don't think this is that sort of situation. So the Bucks should just be able to out-talent the Carolina Panthers in this one. And I think you get a nice, neat number here at 5. I would take this, without looking at the number, I would have said it was probably closer to 7.5. So you give me a 5 because there's no belief around the country in Tampa Bay. I think they cover the spread.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you said. A ton of trends would push you toward Carolina here. Underdog in the division, low total, sitting at like 36.5, 37, depending on where you look. In general, that would push you toward taking a dog of 5 points. Over the last 20 years, teams are 17-19 straight up and 20-16 against the spread after firing their coach in season. So in that next game, that's not a strong enough trend for me. And I think you're completely right. I think this is the opposite of the Josh McDaniels situation, where you saw, clear relief, jubilation on the faces of the Las Vegas Raiders after that firing. I think Carolina, I'm not saying that they were all just in lockstep and love Frank Reich, but I don't think he was hated by any means. And I think they're aware of how chaotic this organization has been. And, even if you take that out of the equation, I mean, Carolina, we were talking to Scott Pianowski from Yahoo on the show last night, and, just kind of discussing like how uniquely bad they are, because they're not like comically bad. Every year you get 2 or 3 like terrible teams. Like this year, the Giants, the Jets, teams that are allowing 99-yard pick sixes before halftime. Like Carolina's not doing anything weird. They're just boring. They go 3 and out.
No talent.
They can't generate big plays. That's the thing. You look at Bryce Young's passing chart and it's just, 5 yards, 6 yards here and there. Like it's 3rd and 8. You feel like they have no chance to pick that up. That's like a 3rd and 15 for them. I looked this up yesterday, Brandon. The Panthers have fewer big play passes, which the NFL defines as at least 25 yards. They have fewer than the Patriots this season. Like, think about what that means. I mean, they're 31st in terms of ripping off big plays. They're near the bottom of the league in big play runs as well. They've gone 5 straight games without even scoring 20 points. They haven't topped 300 yards of total offense in 6 straight. And like, I'm not a Tampa Bay apologist. Like, I really don't think the Bucs are all that good, but I think they have a good enough defense to hold Carolina to 10, 13 points in this game. And if you could just get to, 17 or 20, that's probably enough.
Yeah, you want to keep an eye on some of those defensive injuries because the Bucs have been dealing with it for the last couple of weeks now. So if those guys, the Devin Whites of the world, get healthy, then you feel a lot better about it. But the Bucs should be able to cover this number at home. I agree. I just don't see how Carolina generates any offense. The firing of Frank Reich was an indictment on the draft pick of Bryce Young and nothing more.
Yep, I think you're completely right about that. This could be one that I think Tampa Bay wins in similar fashion to Week 10 against Tennessee, 20-6. Not impressive. You don't come out of it feeling great against Tampa. But I think this is just more so a bet against a Carolina team that just cannot do anything on offense. All right, I'll try to pitch you out one more, and I'm not strong on either of these, and I want to see if you have them on your list as well. I'm leaning Texans -3.5 at home against Denver, and I'm leaning Miami -9.5. I know they're on the road at Washington, but this is a Commanders team that feels dead in the water, especially on defense.
Yeah, I'd feel much better about the Commanders side if they showed any sign of life against Dallas, but that's what Dallas does to teams, and Miami doesn't. They don't. Not on the road. I don't know what the weather situation is, but it's the Northeast, and it's going to be December by the time this game is played, so it's probably going to be gross. This just doesn't set up to be a Miami Dolphins game. The Commanders can't stop anybody defensively, so it's a great matchup. I think if this were in Miami, I would take the Dolphins -20. In Washington, D.C. or Landover, Maryland, I just can't quite get there. I would play an over. I think the Commanders are going to be able to score on this team. They still have weaponry on offense. Brian Robinson at running back. They're going to be able to get chunk yards against this defense. can't quite get there. I do agree on the Houston Texans, though. I think this Broncos team has been so fortunate. I mean, Justin Simmons is playing some incredible ball right now on that defense of the Denver Broncos. But this team is just not good on offense. They rely so heavily on these freak catches from Cortland Sutton to just stay alive in these drives. If the Houston Texans are rolling at all on offense the way that we've seen them over the last few weeks, I don't see how Denver keeps up.
Total's 47.5. And if that holds up, if this is a game that's played in the mid to high 20s or even into the 30s, I want Houston, right? Like if this turns into anything close to a shootout, the Texans are the side for me. What we do need is some injury clarification. Tank Dell was back at practice today. That is massive. We'll see on Noah Brown. He was limited yesterday. Dalton Schultz, their starting tight end, did not practice today. I think he might be trending toward not playing. They have they have just a slew of injuries on the offensive line, but for whatever reason, it feels like it hasn't mattered all that much, partially because CJ Stroud has just been so good at evading pressure and moving around in the pocket. But yeah, I respect Denver, certainly. I mean, the turnaround on defense is borderline unprecedented. I mean, they're 7th in defensive EPA per play since week 6. Goes without saying, they were dead last by a mile before that. So some sort of switch was flipped. And I do think, you got a corner like Surtain, like that can go a long way towards slowing down Houston. But the Texans are just they're a wagon right now, man. Like watching that full game against Jacksonville last week, I mean, you're terrified when this offense is on the field. And, Denver's won, 5 straight, but they're doing it with the run. They're doing it with screen passes. They're playing really conservatively. They're not turning the ball over. And I think for the most part, that can continue. Like you should be able to run the ball on the Houston Texans. But again, I think Houston's going to be able to go score for score. And if this starts pushing into the 20s, I don't know if at some point Denver's not going to be able to keep up.
Yeah, and look at who Denver's been doing this against. I mean, now part of that I know they've got a Mahomes. The Chiefs offense has not really been it's not hit its full stride, and it was impressive what they were able to do there. Josh Allen, they were able to slow him down. That's impressive. The last couple of weeks, I mean, they're going up against Josh Dobbs and the combination of Dorian Thompson-Robinson and PJ Walker. They're just, how many different times can you go up against quarterback elites in the NFL, which CJ Stroud he's in that group right now with the way that he's playing. He's playing at an MVP-like level. I get Houston at home off of a loss against a team that's playing way above their head right now. So I'm totally with you on the Houston Texans.
Okay. All right. Any other games you want to get off your chest before we head out?
There's one that I'm looking at. I wish that this was sitting at, you talk about the difference of that hook. Sometimes it can be life or death in the betting world, but I still really like the Detroit Lions going up against the Saints. I got another bounce back opportunity here with the Lions after that loss against Green Bay. Detroit's just a far better team right now. I think they match up stylistically well with the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints have not yet covered the spread playing a game inside of the Superdome this year for what it's worth. I would take I like the Lions. I like it a whole lot more at -4, but at -4.5, I would still take Detroit.
Yeah, this is one that I went back and forth on. Like I took the Lions in my picks article. I took them in our staff picks piece as well. I didn't feel overly strongly about it. And this is a quintessential situation where I think it makes sense to wait on your picks because, excuse me, there's some pretty big time injuries on the New Orleans side that could swing this for me. Chris Olave is still in concussion protocol. He was limited on Wednesday. Seems to be moving in the right direction, but who knows? Rashid Shaheed could end up missing this game. They're without Michael Thomas. I mean, this is already an offense that struggles to score when it's at full strength. And, all of a sudden they could be down arguably their top 3 receivers if all 3 of those guys don't play. Defense has been getting healthier, but still, Cameron Jordan missed practice yesterday, and he's kind of 50-50 to play at this point. The question for me with Detroit is, they've kind of gone down the same path as Cincinnati, and obviously losing Burrow changes things more than anything for the Bengals. But the Lions defense, which we were praising early in the season for looking so much better than last year when they were one of the worst defenses in the league, they've kind of fallen back into that same trap, man. I mean, they gave up over 500 yards to Baltimore in that ugly loss back in week 7. They gave up over 400 to a Chargers offense that hasn't looked good since. Almost lost to the Bears. Obviously had a disaster game last week against Green Bay. To start as slowly as they did 2 weeks in a row, that is concerning. And I think you could argue that, all right, what are the chances of that happening again? probably not good. Are they going to turn the ball over 3 or 4 times? They have 7 turnovers with 1 turnover forced in the last 2 games. That's a luck type of stat that probably comes back around. But I feel like I've lost a little bit of faith in the Lions.
Jared Goff in a dome, so you still like the fact that he doesn't have to face the conditions. He is the most profitable quarterback in the NFL, and I don't really like pulling that stat out when they're rolling, but when they're not is when it's time to hop back on. Jared Goff he's an ATM when it comes to covering the spread, and I have a hard time trying to hop on the moving train, but if we're at a stop, I'll hop on. And I feel like now's the time to buy Detroit stock.
If you're on Detroit, I think your hope is that they can win this game on the ground. You think of New Orleans as a great defense, and they've slipped a little bit. They're allowing 4.5 yards per carry. That's the 6th highest in the NFL. 124 yards per game. That's in the top 10. Rushing EPA, they've sunk all the way back to the middle of the pack. They were much higher early on. So yeah, I think I thought last week was going to be the bounce back spot for Detroit. So I'm very cautious of just continuing to roll this over and be like, all right, this is the week they come back.
Well, the Packers all of a sudden are a wagon. I also like Green Bay, but I wish I was getting the 6. They're at plus 5.5 in the contest. You're not willing to go there?
I'm not willing to go there because I think we're underestimating how good the Chiefs defense is. And I think we're maybe underestimating how bad some of the defenses that they've gone up against the last few weeks are, especially, LA and Detroit. Those are not good defenses. You can move the ball on them. And I don't think you're going to be ripping off big plays through the air against Kansas City. I think the pressure is going to be turned up on Jordan Love, and I love what I've seen from him. No, I mean, I'm not trying to take anything away from the Packers, but this is another team that is super banged up, right? And they were missing a ton of starters last week. Like, if they don't get that fluky, he throw it, was it knocked out of his hand, return for a touchdown play? Like, I don't know if that plays out the way it did. And I think Detroit kind of dug itself too big of a hole early on, and Green Bay was able to play with leverage the rest of the game. Even at home, at 5.5, I don't love it. If it was like 7, even 6.5, you could talk me into it, but 5.5, it's a stay away or maybe even a slight lean toward KC.
Yeah, I tend to agree. If it was 6.5, I would be pounding the table for it. At 5.5, I'm not going to fight you on it.
Okay. All right. Good stuff, man. I'm glad we went head to head on some of these because now you're making me second guess, which is exactly what we want here. It's no fun if we just, we agree on 5 games and that's that. So we have some discussing
to do. Then you're going to lose once that happens.
Right. We have some discussing to do. I will, be in conversation with my guy, John McKechnie, and see what we end up locking in. But I think we're at least in agreement on Tampa Bay -5. We'll have a decision to make as to whether we want to submit the picks early and take Dallas -9 tonight. I might just override you and still take the Steelers anyway, Brandon. And
I had a feeling that might happen.
And then I'll have to eat crow when Arizona wins that game outright, and you get to gloat next week. But fun slate coming at us, man. And as always, we want to remind everybody to check out Circa Resort and Casino. They are, of course, putting on the Circa Million contest as well as Circa Survivor. It is the midst of football season over at Circa Resort in Las Vegas. They got the best pool in history, Stadium Swim. We're talking 3 levels, 6 pools, a 143-foot diagonal screen. It's basically a Jumbotron. Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. They play every game from college to the pros. This would be like the weekend of all weekends to be there with college football championship weekend. You can catch all the action poolside. They got a ton of seating options, day beds, temperature-controlled cabanas. You can just sit in the hot tub and watch games. I've done that a number of times. Stadium Swim, located at Circa Resort and Casino. Best part is it's open 365 days a year. All sports, all seasons. Book today at circalasvegas.com. That is circalasvegas.com. Brandon, appreciate your help, man. Appreciate you talking me out of some that maybe I'm a little bit too overconfident in this week. But we will reconvene next week, and looking forward to having you on the SiriusXM show tonight as well.
For sure. Best of luck to you this week.